Today, I want to welcome Scott Ritzheimer. He is the founder of Scale Architects. Scott's one of these people that has been there, done that, and has the lessons to prove it. And I could read through his bio and what have you, but here's the bottom line. Scott has proven that he can build, scale, and sell businesses. And then he went off and he launched his own podcast called The Secrets of the High Demand Coach. And his whole purpose was talking to people who had been extremely successful coaches to figure out their secrets. He's the author of Founders Evolution, and we're going to talk about these things. I really recommend you listen to this because it's not often you get to hear somebody share lessons who has been this successful and can help you avoid some of the mistakes. So with that, Scott, welcome.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. It's just going to be a fantastic conversation, Craig. Just listening to a couple episodes before this, I was getting excited about it. So I always like to tell folks, podcast changed the whole course and trajectory of my life about 5 years ago, or no, I guess it's longer now. It's 7, 8 years ago. And so I always get this moment of anticipation right as we start. They're like, this could be that for somebody. So I hope for somebody listening today that it just hits them right where they are.
I'm sure it will. And we were chatting a little bit in the green room, and the thing that hit me is you're full of surprises. And we started off talking about Teslas driving across Texas. It veered into Teslas in Norway, and you say, "Oh yeah, my wife is from Stavanger." I'm like, "What? Back me up? How did all this happen? How'd you meet your wife? Are you Norwegian? Ritzheimer doesn't sound Norwegian."
No, Ritzheimer is not Norwegian. It's a good old Irish name. No, it's not Irish either. It's German. It's a good old German name, and long history there where my folks moved over, many of them from Germany, many of them from the UK, a good 2 or 3 generations ago, before I came around. But to make this story a little bit more interesting, we have to rewind a little bit further than meeting my wife, which was just before that, I accidentally dropped out of high school. There's lots of folks, about a third of my grade actually dropped out, but all of them except for me did it intentionally. I did it by accident. And what had happened, didn't really care for high school, wanted to get out and do my own thing. Which at the time was actually going into ministry. And so I convinced, this is before Pennsylvania did this, but I convinced my high school and a college in Missouri to allow me to do dual enrollment before that was commonplace like it is now. Mm-hmm. And it took all kinds of work. I weighted my schedule the first few years, had a 4.0, and only needed 2.5 credits my senior year to graduate. And I thought, great, like this will be perfect. I'll go out, I'll get a head start on college. I'll come back and graduate with my class was how it was going to work. And everything was all set. Everyone agreed. And I started applying for financial aid. We lived in a rural part of Pennsylvania and had a rural salary in Pennsylvania. And there's no way we were going. Yes.
What part of Pennsylvania?
The Pittsburgh area. So we lived north of for a little while and then south of.
So you don't eat scrapple?
No.
Okay. All right. So
no, we got the pierogies nailed though. Started applying for financial aid, and I just got rejected for everything. Every single thing I applied for. And then I was thinking at least FAFSA will go through. I get denied for FAFSA. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I reach out to the office, the registrar's office, or whoever it was at the school, and said, hey, this is the problem I'm having. And they're like, we'll get back to you. They don't get back to me. They don't get back to me. They don't get back to me. It comes to the middle of July, right? Financial aid deadline's coming up in a couple of weeks. And I talk to them and they say, well, we figured it out. You don't qualify for financial aid because you don't have a GED or a diploma. And so all these things that you've applied for, you need that. And they said, can you get a GED? And I was like, I have no idea. I'll look. So I look it up. I go and find out that there's a school near us that has the GED program available. I go, take the test, turn it in. They tell me 2 things when I hand them the paper. They said, 1, This is the first time we're doing assessment scoring out of state. It's getting sent close to your neck of the woods, the Southwest. And so you won't get your results for 3 weeks. And I'm like, thinking to myself, dang it, like that's after the financial aid deadline. At least I can go back to school and finish up, is the thought that goes through my head. The very next word out of the test proctor's mouth is, and Pennsylvania state law disallows you from returning to a state school once you've attempted the GED. And I was like, oh boy. I'm in trouble now. So couldn't get into the school because I had $0 for tuition. It was a little more than zero, but not enough for tuition. Couldn't go back to high school, and to fill out the country song, right? Someone's going to write one on this eventually. We had 3 dogs. They all died in a 2-week window. This same 2-week window that I'm accidentally dropping out of high school and getting kicked out of the college I wanted to attend. Terrible, terrible time. And in the midst of all of this, I find out about this little ministry school, again in Missouri of all places. Long story short, end up out there like 4 days later. Found, room, board, everything, got in, the whole 9 yards. And Sunday comes up. I'm sitting at a church that was associated with the school because it was a ministry school. And this beautiful blonde woman sits next to me. And my roommate sitting with me said, "Hey, what's your name?" And in the thickest Norwegian accent, she says, "Hilde." And we're like, "Hi." I have no idea. And so that's where I met my wife in Kansas City, Missouri. After just 3 of the worst weeks of my life, I met the most wonderful woman in my life, and the rest has been an absolute joy.
Wow. And so she's from Stavanger, which, if I'm remembering correctly, that's down on the southern, that's on the coast or the southern end of Norway.
Yep, southwest corner.
Have you, this is totally aside, have you ever been to Preikestolen?
Yes, many times. So we took our kids up there 2 or 3 years ago. Anyone who doesn't know what Preikestolen is, it means preacher's pulpit. It's this giant, I think it's about a 900-foot sheer cliff that has a point on it, and it became famous when Tom Cruise crashed a helicopter on it. That was that's the claim to fame for Preikestolen. But it's about a 45-minute drive from our house. It's a beautiful hike.
Yeah. That, I tried to walk up to the edge of that ledge, and it's the only ledge that ever scared me so much that I actually got on my belly and kind of inched up.
Yeah, I definitely did not walk out there. I did the crawl. I stuck my head out over the edge. My wife was about to kill me if I didn't kill me. But yes, in Norway, what folks don't quite get here in the U.S. is anytime you have a ledge like that, there's like a state trooper and like a fence. There's no way that you would ever get out across it. In most state parks here in the U.S., it's all safety and security. In Norway, it's like if you fall, it's like you shouldn't have been that close to the edge. It's on you. Yeah. And so even walking out there, you have to kind of like cross a couple of spots that are like genuinely sketchy, and then there's 50 people out there all doing the same thing, and there's very few accidents because people respect it. But yeah, it's for anyone who's building out their bucket list. Check out the Preacher's Pulpit in Norway and get up there and take the hike. It's beautiful.
So here's where I get confused. Accidental college or high school dropout. You go to a ministry college, but you're more of an entrepreneur. Help me connect the dots.
So fascinating thing. I've done a ton of work in both the nonprofit and for-profit space. Somewhere around 20,000 different organizations that I've helped start. And one of the things that I've discovered is that folks who start nonprofits and folks that start for-profits are very, very similar people. They have different motivations. They have, many times different life stories. But when you look at the basic wiring, that visionary spark that they have, that's an essential ingredient to building a successful organization from the ground up. They're very, very similar. Most like founding pastors are very entrepreneurial, not necessarily in a business sense, but in a mindset way. I had no idea about that. I actually grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad started his own business when I was in my early teens, and I got to see the ups and downs of that. Had no desire to be any part of it, none whatsoever. I was like, I'm getting out of this world. It's tough. I saw him grinding for years, just trying to make it work, having wonderful years and then difficult years, and actually really didn't want much to do with it. Moved down to Atlanta to work with a ministry here. And during that time, I met a guy who later became my partner at this company called Start Church. And we started working together. I just needed a part-time job to pay the bills, right? That was the extent of it. I'm trying to make a really long story short here, but he had this company called Start Church and sold it a couple months after I started working at the company. They did their best to keep everybody on as best they could. Over a course of 18 months, they systematically but unintentionally destroyed the company. The new owners did. The big challenge was that the deal was owner financed. So the previous owner was still trying to stay engaged and help the company out, and there was no bad guy in this situation. Everybody wanted it to work, and it failed miserably. And that was my second introduction to the world of business, right? As my dad as an entrepreneur, and then me watching this company that I had actually grown to love very quickly just reduced to a shadow of its former self. And in August of 2008, there are 2.5 employees left. I was the half. And the new owners call up the previous owner and say, hey, we've done everything we can. We can't get this to work. It's going to sink our business too if we don't cut it. We're going to declare bankruptcy. If you'd like the company back, we're going to declare bankruptcy for the corporation. If you'd like it back, you can have it. Now, at this point, the company is basically 3 broken computers and one of those office chairs with all the padding worn out of the middle. Yeah. Like there's not a whole lot left, but it was basically the blessing to say, hey, you can go ahead and try and start it back up if you want to. And so they said, you have 24 hours. Let us know what you want to do. He said, yes, I want it immediately. Went and got a U-Haul, drove up to get the assets. And on his drive, he called me and said, hey, I think we can make this business work. Will you help me relaunch it? Will you come on as an owner and help me do it? And that's how I became an entrepreneur. I said yes to that call. It wasn't some big scheme. It wasn't a big idea. It wasn't the dream of my life. But it was something I thought we could make it work. And then September 2008 came, and our first 6 months of business, the stock market dropped by 32 points, and I wondered, what in the heck am I thinking? But we found a way. We hustled. We made it work. We worked for his basement until the HOA kicked us out. It was a scrappy young thing, and I loved it. I fell in love with business. Absolutely fell in love with it. And so what ended up happening, a company like Start Church, we sat at the intersection of business and nonprofit, or business and faith, however you want to put it, really the whole time, because we were in many ways a Christian company. We served pastors and leaders. We served rabbis and synagogues as well. And so we were constantly having this wrestle of what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we weave those two together? Should we have goals? Should we have profit? Right? How do we help these folks to succeed in the call that God has on their life? And it wasn't without its challenges, but we succeeded. We helped thousands and thousands of pastors. We helped thousands and thousands of nonprofit founders. And toward the latter end of my time there, we actually started doing a lot of work with businesses as well. And that's where the number 20,000 came from, was all the work that we did with a large number of those folks there during those days.
So kind of going back to when your buddy was picking up the assets and he said, hey, why don't we take this? That's a kind of an interesting moment for me because, it's what you had was a failed business and you're picking up the assets from a failed business. And it kind of feels like the picking up the blankets from somebody that died from a contagious disease. What was the appeal?
You're a lot smarter than we are. That's what the appeal was. You know, what we didn't know at the time was that we were going to also inherit about 250 full service clients that had paid but had not gotten the remainder of their services. We also didn't realize that there was about $100,000 in debt to short-term debt to our vendors in bills that hadn't been paid, that to protect our name, we chose to pay back afterwards. There was a lot more that was a lot worse than what we thought. I think the difference in the metaphor is that what we had was the vision of what it could be. We had spent time thinking about, hey, if this didn't work, what would we do next, right? If it did work, what's that going to look like? And we had a dream for what we thought we could make it work. We had a dream for what it could be. We saw the challenges that folks were facing trying to get their organizations off the ground, and we knew we could do something about it. That was the draw. The draw was to build something that would really have a meaningful impact in those early days in those organizations' lives.
Wow. Wow, that's cool. So what did you guys figure out that the prior management didn't? What was the key to turning that around?
Yeah, I think the key to it, and you know, in hindsight, this is a lot easier. I don't know that we figured this out or they didn't figure it out, but where they got it wrong was that they bought a company and gave up its top asset. They bought the company and then they tried to keep their distance from the previous owner. They wanted to have their space and do it their way, but the company was small enough at that time that he was still the company. Mm-hmm. And what had happened was his first time around, he built a company around him. And this second time around, we used his skill set to build a company with him. And so what that did was it allowed us to build reproducible systems relatively early on that other people could create value, other people could drive sales, other people could drive revenue. And that was something that even though they were doing it in a way they had failed to achieve in our same market. A similar thing that happened was they were blending markets and didn't realize that that was the case. If you have an organization that's less than $3 million, the biggest challenge that you have is knowing and understanding your market and tapping it regularly. There's lots of other things that come downstream of that, but if you don't get that one thing right, none of the other things matter. And they had also made the mistake in that respect that they thought their market and our market were the same, and they weren't. And so when they tried to apply their skills and techniques and abilities from their market to ours, it just flopped. And you know, more than that, I couldn't tell you. I was a low man on the totem pole back in those days. So I don't know a whole lot about the inner workings of what they did, just what we saw. But what we realized pretty early on was that we had to hyper focus on our market and what our customers wanted, not what we thought the answers were. And I think we were forced to have the humility to do that because, you know, there was no other option, right? It was that or die as an organization, and that really drove us to figure it out.
So you've said a few things that I really want to drill in on. And one, the most recent, you had to know who your customers were. And one of the stories I love to share is about Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple. Not because I think Steve Jobs was a brilliant human being. He was a brilliant marketer and a not so brilliant human being. But when he came back to Apple in 97, he spent millions of dollars running an ad, TV ad, 60-second ad that said absolutely nothing about computers. And at the time, Apple was a computer company. There were no iPods, no iPhones, none of that. But when I dig in and understand what he was doing, he figured out that the people that he could most quickly sell computers to were creatives. So he ran the Think Different ad, which starts off, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the square pegs and the round holes. He's speaking directly to the most passionate buyers of Apple computers.
Yes.
And so I'm hearing you say the same thing. You had to be really clear on who your customer was,
Yeah.
and just get hyper focused on that.
Yeah. It's so true, and you can see it happening in a big business context. It happens a lot again. Interestingly enough, when the company is much larger, there's a gap in between where we figure it out enough that we're okay. But in those early stages, to me, it is everything. Now, I'm a system and process guy. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm a structure and repeatability guy through and through. It's a huge part of what I do to help folks scale. But one of the challenges I think that particularly earlier stage organizations face, younger, not by age, but by tenure, founders and entrepreneurs face, is they listen to all these podcasts and resources and books out there on leadership and all these things that we should do as founder and CEO. And it muddies the water on what we actually need to do now. And so a huge portion of what I do, everything from my podcast to our website to the work I do with my clients, is designed around the idea of helping folks understand not another thing that they should do, but how they can ignore the whole mass of things that are good things that they don't really need to do right now, and understand what are the 2 or 3 things that they actually must do right now and in this stage. And to answer your question, we did that by accident. It was no grand scheme, right? And it wasn't that we had it all figured out, but accidentally we stumbled on the fact that we had to find a way of connecting with our customers and doing it again and again. And we had to be tuned into their needs. We had to know where they were and what they were thinking. And we wrapped not only our sales and marketing process, but our fulfillment process was intrinsically wrapped around that idea.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned sales, and that goes back to something earlier that you said 2 things. One, about the founder of the company, that the company was originally built around him. And so he wasn't replaceable. The company, when you take him out, the company doesn't run.
Yeah.
But you also talked about sales. And that's something I see a lot of. I see people that they're like, oh, we got this star sales guy. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, why are you keeping him? And they're like, because he brings all the revenue. And we could break down all the ways that happens, but the biggest thing that they're saying is we don't have a sales process where we can hire and put different people in and fill the sales role. I'm interested in your take on that.
Again, I think this is a stage specific issue, right? If you have someone early on, vast majority of the time, founder's the one who's the chief sales officer, right? Like they should be driving it. No one can sell in that early stage like you can. Even if you're terrible at sales, you can't hire someone to solve that problem for you. 9 times out of 10, if you don't value that activity enough to do it yourself, you're not going to value it enough to pay someone else to do it effectively for you. So the other risk of it, and this is something similar to what you're talking about, is if you hire out sales too soon, that is the oxygen of your organization. What do you think happens when somebody, figures, there's a better way? We can walk out and take the oxygen with us. It's not helpful. So for me, I think early on, most founders or someone on the founder team should be intimately involved in and responsible for sales. Now, what happens from there, and what happened for us, was we got beyond the point where he could carry all of it. We had to have somebody else come in and help out. And we found, again, it was a bit of dumb luck. Looking back on it now, I can see how it worked, but it was no grand scheme at the time. And we found someone who could help us. And what he did was exactly what you're talking about. He started from the get-go on saying, hey, we're going to build a process for how to do this. This is what our pitch looks like. This is how we're going to follow up. This is how we're going to generate leads. And he really walked us through that process. And immediately what we did after bringing him on was bring somebody else on as well to implement that process at the same time. And that way, our income was distributed over 3 different sources. So in the short run, if one of them was sick, it was okay because somebody else could fill in. In the long run, if one of them had left, which thank God none of them did, we could fill in that gap. We weren't exposed to one person, right? A lot of folks will talk about what if they got hit by a bus. It's just a terrible, terrible exercise. But we weren't exposed to if one person wasn't there anymore. Let's say they won the lottery, or worst case scenario, they went and started to do it on their own. we were never exposed to that because of the structure we had where multiple people could do it. So I think that's really important. I would say, to your point, if you play the tape a little bit further, one of the biggest things that prevents companies from truly scaling, from getting past that organic growth stage and into true scalability, is they are beholden to one or two what we call big dog operators. And many times they're in a sales seat, right? They're recalcitrant and stubborn and mavericks, and they're not culture fits, but we need them, right? We built the company on their back, and now we can't imagine life without them because we think that would all go away. And to a certain extent, that's true if you don't have the processes and systems. But if you do build like you should, what I have seen multiple times, both in my own companies and in others, is that when that person goes out, sales go up and not down.
That's so interesting. And I think that would surprise a lot of people. When they lose their star sales guys, sales go up, not down.
Yes. And again, I would just say at the right point in time, right? So if you haven't done that legwork, if you don't have a system, if you got rid of sales as soon as you possibly can as a founder, and you have one person who represents 100% of your sales, and that person leaves, sales are not going up, right? Not anytime soon. And that is an exceptionally painful process. I've had to walk in on the tail end of that for several clients, and it is a grueling grind to try and recover from that. But again, if you use the opportunity that salesperson creates by understanding what about how they're working works, and you start to begin to build systems and processes around that align with who you are and what works for your market, that's where you see it's not about the heroics anymore. Right? It's not, you don't have to make a diving catch to hit your sales goal. You have to run the plays. And if you do that repeatedly again and again, that's where success comes from. And the same person who did the heroics, back in the day is usually not the person who's going to be able to follow the plays and run them with the consistency you need to scale.
Yeah. And that's such a critical insight. Well, let's move on. So you now run Scale Architects, and you have your book coming out. And why'd you write the book?
Yeah, so the big idea behind the book, and we've kind of touched on this a couple of times, was the biggest challenge that I faced as a leader and that I saw these other leaders facing was not one thing. Right. It was that every time it seemed like you figured something out, something else would smack you in the face, a month or two later. I got so tired of getting blindsided by new challenges. Every time I felt like I figured it out, I understood the rules of the game, it felt like someone changed them overnight. Early on, it was about how much we could sell and getting stuff out the door. And then all of a sudden we had to have managers and a leadership team and had to figure that out. And then we had to staff a full sales team and do lead development. And it just felt like it was just constantly changing. The recipe for success and how I needed to show up, first as COO and then CEO, was constantly changing. And I always kind of had an idea of what was in the rearview mirror. I knew how to do what we had done, but I grew less and less confident in my ability to understand what we needed to do next. And that came to a head after I'd taken over in the CEO seat. It was a couple years into that. And as I was coming in, we had this problem where our profit margin was shrinking each year. Right, we were growing our revenues by, at this time, about $1 million a year, but the percentage of that we were keeping was getting smaller and smaller. It was sitting in the mid-20s, and by the end of a 3-year kind of cycle of trying to fix it and failing to do so, it dropped all the way down to just over 7% for a year.
Oh my goodness.
Which meant we were doing more, selling more, hiring more people, and not only were we keeping less of it, when you get under 10% in most environments, not all of them, but in most environments, you do not have the lifeblood that you need to be able to grow effectively. It gets very, very close to not being sustainable, let alone growable. And we had tried all the stuff. We had read all the books, the Collins, the Lencioni, the Wickman, like all of the business leadership development, structure books. And they were all helpful. They helped us create this successful multi-million-dollar business. But none of them were turning this problem around. And it's at that point that I heard about this idea that your strategies for success have to change and adapt over time, but that it's not just guess and check, right? It's not like we have to just make it up as we go every stage. There's actually a predictable pattern that organizations go through. And as I did that, I realized I have to show up. The biggest problem is not my bottom line. The biggest problem is how I'm showing up as a founder when I really need to be showing up as a CEO. I needed to stop trying to fix everything myself, to jump in and save the day, or to make the diving catch, or to land the deal, or whatever it was. I had to build an executive team that did that, whether I was there or not. Because there wasn't any problem that one person could solve. It took a whole team working together to do it. And in doing that, working through, I found some wonderful resources, most of them by a gentleman named Les McEwen, who's a dear friend and colleague of mine now. And it ultimately allowed us to triple our bottom line in a year. We turned that thing around. We tripled our bottom line in a year, and then added 5 percentage points the next year and the next year after. And not, yeah.
Yeah. And so a couple examples. What did you do that fixed the bottom line?
Yeah, crazy stuff that has nothing to do with the bottom line. We worked on our org chart. We had just grown and kind of thrown people into management roles, and so the things that we did, these make absolutely no sense. But when you put them together, you realize it's actually the pattern that every organization follows. But we reworked our org chart. We reshuffled a lot of folks, had to move a lot of folks out, and had to hire some others in. We changed the way that we made decisions as a team, and in doing so realized we had to cut about 30% of our revenue off. There was a part of our business that represented 30% of our revenue, and we realized we had to kill it overnight, only because we changed the way that we made decisions. We never would have discovered it beforehand. There's a whole lot to that. So we actually made it harder on ourselves. And then we focused really, really intensely on taking that new org chart, that new clarified strategy, and driving it into every part of what we did, right? Aligning everybody and also empowering folks. We pushed decision-making down inside the organization as much as we could. And none of those were inherently financial decisions. In fact, the reorg on the org chart actually cost us more money. But in doing so, it led us to a state where we were making significantly better decisions at all levels in the organization. We were able to cut significant chunks of expenditures. And it wasn't like we were cutting big swaths of people from the organization. That wasn't how it worked. But we were able to become exceptionally more efficient because we were leading the organization more effectively. It wasn't about what we did anymore. It was about how we did it. And that was a huge shift that I had to make as a founder.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, because certainly over the last couple of years, as the economy got a little weird, different people view it. I'm not going to call it tough. The economy got weird, and I saw company after company after company just working on cutting expenses. And what you're saying is, it wasn't about cutting expenses, and in some cases, expenses went up. It was about getting the right people in the right places, getting people making good decisions.
100%. Cutting expenses isn't inherently bad. It's a game of whack-a-mole, right? If you don't address the fundamental underlying challenges ahead of time, the expenses are just symptoms. And so you can, if you've got, let's say you've got a broken bone, you can go and take ibuprofen and mask the pain, but the break is still there. You're going to have to keep doing it. And the problem with just saying, hey, we solve all of our profitability problems by either chasing more revenue or lowering expenses, it misses the whole function of how organizations work. And that is through getting teams to come together and make high quality decisions. And so if you just go in and cut expenses, you're going to have to do that every 6 months or 6 years. It's just going to cycle in on itself again and again and again. If you try and revenue your way out of the problem, you're going to do what we did, and you're going to create more and more revenue, but you're going to keep less and less of it and actually make your problems bigger. And so what we have to do is we have to shift our focus to, first, how we show up as leaders, second, how we build the team around us, and third, how we structure our organization to really create the scalability that we want.
Wow. Scott, I could go another hour. I mean, what you're sharing is just amazing. And it's surprising. I think a lot of people need to hear this. But I know we got to wrap, but I know that you actually work with people. You help people solve these problems. How did people reach you?
Yeah. So a couple of ways. The best way is to head on over to scalearchitects.com. I wish it was as easy as saying, look for Scott Ritzheimer, but no one can spell Ritzheimer, and there's two of us. I'm a junior. So look for the Scott Ritzheimer, if you can spell it right, who looks like he's 14. You'll find me on all the social media platforms. It's a little easier to head over to scalearchitects.com, and you'll find a way to schedule time with me. You'll also find a free copy of the book. We're making it available for free to everyone right now, where you can get the full, not just the first chapter, but the full book for free, to walk you through the 7 stages that founders go through on their journey from pre-launch to post-exit, from dissatisfied employee to visionary founder. And you can get a free copy today at scalearchitects.com. You can also schedule some time with me there.
Scott, thanks for sharing that powerful insights, and I do hope people reach out to you.
Craig, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.